Who's to blame for the events going on in Afghanistan right now? The short answer is a lot of stakeholders. Very recently, the Taliban recaptured the country of Afghanistan and, as of now, maintains control over government, industry, and social life. While the end goal of the Taliban is slightly opaque at this time, a spokesperson for the organization has said that the goal is to restore peace and security to the country, which includes banishing of all Western troops and to enforce its own version of Sharia or Islamic law. After 20 years of control over Afghanistan for the United States, the Taliban, in just a few short weeks, has taken charge of the entire country. This is something that's flabbergasting. And ostensibly, the United States is in a conundrum. So, to the question, who's to blame? Well, the obvious answer is Joe Biden. He is the commander-in-chief, and the Taliban's takeover did happen under his watch. However, it's much more complicated than that. Even though President Biden did disregard advice from his advisors, there's still a lot more room to go around as it pertains to the blame game. But do keep in mind that U.S. officials did tell President Biden that they were concerned with the U.S.-backed government in Kabul being able to prevent the Taliban from taking over swaths of the country. Furthermore, he was told that the possibility of extremist groups under Taliban control could operate freely within the country and thus undo any and all advances in governance, religious freedoms, and women's rights. But there I digress. Others we can blame include Donald Trump and his peace deal with the Taliban. If you Google Donald Trump peace deal, Taliban, Google will provide you more than enough information on the atrocity of this deal. President Obama and his inability to extirpate the Taliban once and for all, and of course, George W. Bush, the one who put the United States in Afghanistan to start. But, in my opinion, the Afghan forces who fled, these individuals are the ones most deserving of blame. Not only were they derelict in their duties, they failed so many people of Afghanistan. So, with that noted, here's a short clip from Joe Biden's speech post-Taliban takeover. And in this, place focus on who Joe Biden places blame on.
We focus on the threats we face today in 2021, not yesterday's threats. Today, the terrorist threat has metastasized well beyond Afghanistan. Al-Shabaab in Somalia, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, al-Nusra in Syria, ISIS attempting to create a caliphate in Syria and Iraq, and establishing affiliates in multiple countries in Africa and Asia. These threats warrant our attention and our resources. We conduct effective counterterrorism missions against terrorist groups in multiple countries where we don't have permanent military presence. If necessary, we'll do the same in Afghanistan. We've developed counterterrorism over-the-horizon capability that will allow us to keep our eyes firmly fixed on the direct threats to the United States and the region, and act quickly and decisively if needed. When I came into office, I inherited a deal that President Trump negotiated with the Taliban. Under his agreement, U.S. forces would be out of Afghanistan by May 1, 2021, just a little over 3 months after I took office. U.S. forces had already drawn down during the Trump administration from roughly 15,500 American forces to 2,500 troops in country. And the Taliban was at its strongest militarily since 2001. The choice I had to make as your president was either to follow through on that agreement or be prepared to go back to fighting the Taliban in the middle of the spring fighting season. There would have been no ceasefire after May 1. There was no agreement protecting our forces after May 1. There was no status quo of stability without American casualties after May 1. There was only the cold reality of either following through on the agreement to withdraw our forces or escalating the conflict and sending thousands more American troops back into combat in Afghanistan, lurching into the third decade of conflict. I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces. That's why we're still there. We were clear-eyed about the risks. We planned for every contingency, but I always promised the American people that I will be straight with you. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country.
I want you to remember this face right here. You're going to be seeing this face for the next few months, potentially even years. But with that said, the situation for Afghanistan and for the United States will get a lot worse. It will get a lot worse, especially if the United States fails to eradicate the Taliban ASAP. Just take a look at these clips right here.
They're just chanting death to America, but they seem friendly at the same time. It's utterly bizarre.
I'm just flummoxed looking at the situation in Afghanistan right now. But one thing that's most disconcerting in my eyes is opium and the exports of opium from Afghanistan. Yes, the Taliban does control Afghanistan, and yes, like I said before, they do control industry. Something in the United States that's been an issue for a long time is the insatiable desire for drugs. Yes, that's right, the United States has a drug problem. Looking at the Census Bureau, we have come to understand that for the first time in this country's history, one group has declined for the first time since records have been recorded. And one of the contributing factors stems from drug overdoses and opiates. And to add to that, in 2020 alone, the U.S. hit a record of drug overdoses. As a result of the fiasco in Afghanistan, we will see an influx of drugs into this country. That's something I promise you. Now take a look at this clip here.
And then this week, the new census numbers came out. Here's what those numbers show. The number, not the proportion, but the absolute number of Americans who describe themselves as white has dropped for the first time in our history since the census began back in 1890. The total decline is around 5 million people. Now that is huge. Experts who study demographics for a living were shocked by it. They'd never seen anything like this. Why did this happen? Where did all these people go and why? They're Americans, remember. But wait a second, you ask, what about the numbers? What happened to all those white people who are now missing from the census? Well, it turns out many of them perished in the opioid epidemic. Hundreds of thousands of young Americans, mostly from rural communities, dead from drug overdoses.
So to conclude, what's taking place in Afghanistan right now is a very dire situation, and a very sad situation at that. Just looking back at the past with regard to the United States, we lost over 2,400 troops, and of the soldiers that we sent over there, we had 20,000 come back home injured. Of that, we spent $2.26 trillion, according to Brown University's Cost of War project. And also on top of that, I feel bad for the individuals who have to live in Afghanistan. Just looking at the highlights and the news clips and the newsreels, there's so many people so scared. There's so much uncertainty going on right now. So overall, it's a very sad situation, and I hope the situation improves for so many. With that said though, I am doubtful, and I think things will get worse before they get better. So with that said, my question to you Where do you think this situation in Afghanistan escalates from here? Do me a favor. Please like, subscribe, and thanks. More to come.